He did not sit and give him a lecture, but rather he said, خُذُوا عَنِّي مَنَاسِكَكُمْ. Take from me your manasik. And he went from Al-Madinah alayhi salatu wassalam to the journey of Hajj, and the Sahaba radiallahu anhum watching and learning. And this is how we get to know how to make Hajj. The same thing with the Salah. صَلُّوا كَمَا رَأَيْتُمُونِي أُصَلِّي. Pray the same way that you saw me praying. So, but that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserved this deen. So we have very specific rules and pillars and conditions and recommended acts and so on. So we'll talk about that inshallah ta'ala briefly before Maghrib, and then after Maghrib, the second session inshallah ta'ala, we'll talk about from the very beginning of the journey what to do on a daily basis till the end inshallah ta'ala. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from each and every one of us. So we go straight to it inshallah ta'ala. The first thing is, what is the definition of Hajj? Hajj is an Arabic word, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned it in the Quran, وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ حَجُّ الْبَيْتِ مَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا. So it refers to the meaning of al-qasd, when you aim to something. And of course the religious definition of it is قصد البيت أو قصد الكعبة, to aim to go to the Kaaba, to the house of Allah, the first house of worship, للنسك, for the ibadah, replying to the call from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as we know that this is the hukm of it, or the ruling of Hajj, as the second point here is that this is one of the pillars of Islam, and it's an obligation once in lifetime. And each point, as you see, there are so many evidences. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala perfected this deen. If we go extensively to all of the different evidences, the adillah in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, we need a month to go through it. But again, this will be very brief inshallah ta'ala. The hukm, what's the hukm of Hajj? What's the ruling of Hajj? It's wajibun fil umri marra. It's an obligation once in lifetime. And the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam is very clear in this, when he said, Ya ayyuhan nas, inna Allah kataba alaykum al-hajj fahujju. Allah ordained Hajj upon you, so make Hajj. So a man, he said, O Prophet of Allah, afi kulli aamin ya Rasulullah? Is it every year, O Messenger of Allah? The Prophet ﷺ did not reply. The man asked again, and the Prophet ﷺ, he said, دعوني ما تركتكم, leave what I left for you. Because if I said نعم, لما استطعت. If I said yes, it's an obligation every year, you won't be able to do so. إذا أمرتكم بشيء فأتوا منه ما استطعتم. If I command you to do something, do of it the best of your ability. وإذا نهيتكم عن أمر فاجتنبوه. If I forbid you from something, then stay away from it. So this is also as the ayah, وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ حِجُّ الْبَيْتِ لِمَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا. And again, as you see here, the PowerPoint presentation is not in details, just the titles, and then you guys have to, I guess, if you want to take notes, inshallah ta'ala, it will be benefiting, inshallah. So what's the hukm of Hajj? It's a pillar of Islam. It's an obligation once in lifetime. And with the Hajj, and I'm not going to get into some differences of opinions, Umrah also is wajib. Umrah is an obligation also once in lifetime. And that's why if someone is going for Hajj, and we'll talk about the different types of nusuk, the best, even some of the ulama, they say that it's obligatory, is to make Hajj tamattu, where a person makes Umrah and then Hajj, but we'll get to that inshallah ta'ala. So this is the hukm of al-Hajj. One point with the hukm of al-Hajj, which is important. If someone has the means this year to go for Hajj, and the means used to be az-zad wal-rahila, the provisions, and the provisions for a person to go to Hajj and come back, and the provisions for his family, and al-rahila, the mount, the transportation that would get him to go for Hajj. But now you can add to it the logistics of it, Hajj visas and things like this. So you might have all the means, but you don't get the visa. So that means you're not able to make it for Hajj. So if someone has the means to go for Hajj and intentionally they delay it, is it a sinful act or not? That's the differences of opinions among the ulama. And take the opinion that, which is the opinion of Imam Ahmad and others, that this is haram for someone to delay Hajj when they have the means to go. So again, but the other opinion is a valid one, right? So once a person has the means, then a person should take the means to go for Hajj, and this is also have the details to it. Then after that, there are 6 conditions for the obligations, for the obligation of Hajj. Conditions for every ibadah. This is something that we need to understand briefly. Every ibadah, we have to have conditions for it. Wudu is a condition for the salah. Can you just start the salah without its conditions? Of course not. You have to make wudu, you have to face the qibla. All these are conditions. So there are 6 conditions for Hajj, and these conditions of Hajj, there are 5, and the 6th one is specifically for women. So as the conditions of every ibadah, which is al-Islam, to be a Muslim, of course. So a person has to be a Muslim first before they can go for Hajj, even though Hajj is an obligation upon everyone. But for everyone to be a Muslim and then to go for Hajj. Al-Aql, to have sanity, not someone that is insane. Al-Bulugh, for someone that reached the age of puberty. If a child, and this is the next point, if a child makes Hajj, the Hajj is valid, the child gets the reward for it, and the parents or the guardians of the child, they get rewards for it, but it doesn't take away the obligation, Hajjatul Islam, from the child. Once he reaches the age of puberty, then he is mukhatab, he is addressed with Hajj to make it as an obligation upon himself. Not to say I did it when I was a child, but it's valid from him and he get rewards, and the parents also, or the guardians, they get reward. So al-bulugh is a condition of obligation. A person has to be in the state of puberty. As the ulama, they say, to be a free person, not being enslaved, for example. And the 5th one is al-istita'a, the ability, the physical ability, the financial abilities, and whatever becomes, as we said, in one's lifetime. So the al-istita'a, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لِمَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا, for those who have the means to go for Hajj. And when the ulama, they talk also extensively into the subject of al-istita'a, the capability, like the provisions, for example. It is not just for you to go there. You have to also have the means to return back. You have to have something to leave for your family to return back, and things like this. The 6th condition, which is specifically for women, and that is for her to have a mahram to travel to Hajj. Because of the hadith of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, هي الحديث لا تسافر امرأة تؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر مسيرة يوم وليلة إلا مع ذي محرم. It is not permissible for a believing woman. She believes in Allah and the last day, that she travels a distance of a day and night without a mahram. So if a woman, she has the means to go for Hajj, but there's no mahram to go with her, that means she's not able to go for Hajj. She's not sinful. There's no burden on her whatsoever. And the matter should be, she should be at ease with it, right? Till Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for her to go. And ideally people will go with their husband or with their son or whatever means that she can go for Hajj. And this is where, again, we talked about the child's Hajj and the subject of Hajjul Badal. These are all introductions before we get into the subject. Hajjul Badal is the Hajj when someone makes Hajj on someone else's behalf. So is this permissible? Yes, for those who passed away and they did not make Hajj, with some details to it, or someone that is alive, but there's no way for them to make it for Hajj. Very old in age, they're not able to make it for the journey of Hajj. Someone else can do it on their behalf. Not that someone is sick this year or so, someone that no way according to the physical means that they would make it for Hajj. So someone else can do it on their behalf. And there are conditions for that. One of the basic ones is the one that makes the Hajj al-Badal, Hajj on someone's behalf, he has to have made Hajj for himself first. It is not permissible to make Hajj on someone's behalf unless you had made Hajj for yourself first. So this is with these things briefly. These terminologies, it's important to know them one after the other, inshallah ta'ala. And then again, everything will be put together, inshallah ta'ala. The first one is the mawaqit of Hajj. Even though maybe the types of Hajj should be mentioned first, but this will be mentioned later, inshallah. I don't want you to think now or in way that now you're leaving home and now I'm going to Hajj, but I'm supposed to do first and second and so on. Just bear with me, be patient with these things to get to understand it, and then we'll talk about that, inshallah ta'ala, in the order that it should be. The word mawaqit from al-miqat these are the specific places where the Prophet ﷺ specifically made it very clear that whoever comes to Hajj or Umrah, they cannot pass these specific mawaqit, whether it's the miqat itself. This is a physical place around Mecca, varied in distance. No one can pass by it or adjacent to it. So you can draw a line between all of these places. You cannot cross these mawaqit or what adjacent to it unless you are in state of ihram. And we'll talk about al-ihram. So these are the mawaqit of Hajj. And that's what the Prophet ﷺ is. He said, miqat ahlul Medina, for example, is the al-Aqiq, which is Abyar Ali as it's known now, where it's right outside of al-Medina. Okay. So if someone is traveling from al-Medina to Mecca, then once they get it to the miqat of al-Medina, it's right outside of al-Medina. It's the furthest miqat to Mecca. So where the Prophet ﷺ, he made Hajj and his Umrah from al-Medina. So it's right outside of al-Medina, 9 kilometers outside of al-Medina. So that means the person, his journey in state of al-Ihram is the longest from Medina to Mecca. All the mawaqit are closer to Mecca. So what is the significance of the mawaqit? The Prophet ﷺ, when he stated clearly, وَقَّتَ لِأَهْلِ الْمَدِينَةِ ذَا الْحُلَيْفَةِ وَلِأَهْلِ الشَّامِ الْجُحْفَةِ. The people from the people of Sham, Palestine, Syria, and so on, and anyone that is coming that way. So the same thing with the people coming from Egypt, from Turkey, from America. This is their miqat. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, Al-Juhfa. وَلِأَهْلِ Najd, the people coming from Najd, from Riyadh and Iraq and so on, Qarn al-Manazil. وَأَهْلِ Yemen, Yalamlam. So all of these places, if you see it, I didn't have it on a map, you can see it clearly. These are specific spots. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, هن لهن ولمن أتى عليهن من غيرهن ممن أراد الحج والعمر. So whoever lives there, then their ihram is from there. Whoever lives closer to Mecca from these mawaqit, they don't have to go outside. They can just make their ihram from their place. So those who are living in Mecca, for example, they can make their ihram from Mecca. If they're making the ihram for Hajj, for Umrah, they have to go outside of Mecca. But these are the mawaqit for those who are coming from away beyond it. They cannot cross it unless they are in state of al-ihram. That's why if you go with a plane or so, they will say there's 15 minutes, 20 minutes till the miqat, there's 5 minutes till the miqat, and it is not permissible to pass the miqat unless you are in state of al-ihram. So what is then al-ihram? So again, the mawaqit are physical places where you cannot cross them unless you're in state of al-ihram, and we'll talk about what happens if someone passes them and they forgot, they were asleep, they did not make their ihram or whatever. So al-ihram is a state. Usually the word al-ihram, people refer to it as the pieces or the clothing that they wear, right? Al-ihram comes from haram. That means certain things will be forbidden on you while you are in that state of al-ihram. And of course, every move, there's a wisdom behind it. And there's great wisdoms behind these things, one of which is ta'zim al-Bayt al-Haram, to exalt the house of Allah, the first house of worship, that no one is to come to Mecca unless they are in that state of al-Ihram. And we can talk a lot about this. And every action that we do, especially for Hajj, Hajj is a journey, there is no like of it whatsoever. And that's why if you fulfill all the pillars of Islam, Hajj is a complete different experience, if it's correct to say, because it really perfects one's religion, makes you see the essence of the deen of Islam. And it's all about submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, humbling oneself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You are abd to Allah. You are a slave of Allah. And that's why everything is left behind. A person leaves his home, his comfort, his wealth, his family, and even the clothes that he liked to wear, everybody's wearing the same thing. And then it goes from one stage to the other. So, and this is something else. And this is something that we should actually go through the things that should be in our hearts in every stage of Hajj. But we'll do that, inshallah ta'ala, maybe in another session. But this is as important as what we're discussing, the physical aspects of it. It's very important for us to be, our hearts should be acting, because there are many different things that can distract us from this. So al-ihram, is the state of getting oneself into the nusuk. So what is the definition of al-ihram? Al-ihlal bil-hajj wal-umrah is when you get yourself into the state of hajj or umrah. And it's basically by saying, labbaik Allahumma, your intention is in your heart, and then you are by the miqat or right before it, and you cannot go after the miqat without saying labbaik Allahumma umrah or labbaik Allahumma hajj. It depends on what you're going for. And we'll talk about the types of nusuk. So, for example, Hajj al-Tamattu', which is most of everybody would do, they would go first with Umrah. So they would say, Labbaik Allahumma Umrah. You say it with your tongue, but your intention is in your heart. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ did. So now you are in state of al-ihram. You are in state of al-ihram just by saying that, even if you're not wearing the clothes of al-ihram, yes. So to make sure that we remember that the state of al-ihram is once your intention and you said that you are now in the nusuk, in the rituals of either Hajj or Umrah. But of course, you cannot do that with your normal clothing because you have to forbid certain things on you that are normally permissible. And this is where we talk about the mahdurat or the prohibitions during ihram, right? So the reason why I said it like this is that if someone comes into the miqat and he's wearing pants and shirts and whatever, and he says labbaik Allahumma umrah, and he makes his umrah, and he finishes the umrah. Is the umrah valid? As far as validity is concerned, yes. If he's intentionally doing that, he's sinful. But if he has an excuse in missing one of the prohibitions or whatever, or he forgot, right? There are ways to, there's kafarat, there is kafara, there is expiation to it. Intentionally, of course, no one would do that intentionally. But if someone forgot, either they go back to the miqat and they say labbaik Allahumma umrah and they put their clothes of al-ihram on and they forbid what's supposed to be forbidden and there's no harm on them. If they're not able to go back, then they do the kafara. We'll talk about the kafara later, inshallah ta'ala. Then the details of al-ihram before we get into the prohibitions, and that's part of the sunnah, and this is what we also will repeat briefly when it comes to what we do first and then second and so on. The sunnah is that the person would take a shower to clean oneself, to take what needs to be taken away from the body, like sunan al-fitra, and to put tib or perfume on, as the Prophet ﷺ did, and Aisha radiallahu anha, she put that on the head of the Prophet ﷺ when he was making ihram. And that, with the practicality of things, we'll talk about it inshallah in the airports and things of that nature. And then for men, their ihram is to wear two sheets, lower sheet and the upper sheet. This is the izar and the rida, and it's recommended for both to be white, as the Prophet ﷺ did. And the prohibited actions, as we will get to know, inshallah ta'ala. So the main thing for men is not to wear al-makhit. And the word al-makhit, it does not mean threads. It means not to wear anything sewed to fit on one's body. So that's why this is the two sheets, the upper sheet and the lower sheet. No pants, no shirts, no anything that would fit on the body. Even when people wear the lower sheet like a skirt with elastic bands, this is not permissible. It has to be something that is loose, that you wrap it around yourself, and it's easy. And also maybe we can practice that, inshallah ta'ala. So to stay away from anything that sewed on the body. This is what is meant by al-makhit. But if the clothing itself of al-ihram is sewed at the end, sometimes people see the threads are falling, like they intentionally do not sew it. You mean to like this, for example. You make sure that it's not, the threads are not falling apart like that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's okay. What's meant by al-makhit is something that fits the body, something that is sewed on the body, and with some details. When it comes to women, their ihram is in two places only. For women, ihram is on their face and their palm. These are the two places of ihram for women when it comes to the clothing. That means the Prophet ﷺ forbade women from wearing al-quffazayn, gloves, and from wearing a niqab, right? And a niqab is a specific covering of the face because it fits the face. So the women in Hajj or Umrah, they're not forbidden from covering their face. They're forbidden from wearing the niqab. So the niqab is specific one. It's like the burqa is the one that fits. But if she covers her head from something on top of her head, there's no harm. And that's what Aisha radiallahu anha and Salama radiallahu anhuna, they said. They were with the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam and they having their faces exposed. فإذا مر بنا الركبان, if men are passing by them, سدلت إحدانا جلبابها من فوق رأسها. One of us would bring her jilbab from the top of her head to cover her face. So they would still cover their face in front of the men. And even if that jilbab touches the face, it's okay. It doesn't have to be away from the face. It can cover can touch the face. But what's forbidden is like the same thing as the makhit, something that would fit the face. So if it comes from the top, then there's no problem. The second thing is they don't wear the gloves. So if she covers her hand underneath her khimar, that's fine, but not to wear gloves. There's no specific color for women. There's no specific clothing, the normal clothing that they wear. There's no special clothing, only the face and the hands. So this is with regards to the ihram. And then when we talk about the 10 prohibitions, and there's the talbiyah and things of that nature, but if we count the mahdurat, or what's forbidden once a person is in state of al-ihram till he's relieved, or till they are relieved from the state of al-ihram. If we count these things, and again, this is just theoretical things that we need to observe to make sure that we understand them when you don't, and we know them. If you want to write them down, inshallah ta'ala, very briefly, each one has an evidence and has a hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So the first one is for a man to wear al-makhit. So al-makhit is clothes that are sewed, fits the organs of the person. So qamis, shirt, pants, gloves, imamah, covering the head, all of these types of things. But the things that are permissible to wear, watch, for example, or a ring, or if a person is wearing a belt to keep his money, all of these things are permissible. And when it comes to the foot, what a person wears on in their foot, it's not permissible to wear al-khuffayn. And al-khuff is like the shoes, something that is fit the entire foot from the heels, which is how shoes are. That's why people would wear slippers. And does the face of the foot has to show or not? It doesn't have to show. So as long as there's nothing around the heels, as long as you just you slip your foot in, then this is what is sufficient. And even if a person in situations where it's not feasible, no, but if someone doesn't find anything, they can wear their shoes, as the Prophet ﷺ even said. You don't have to cut it from the back, but don't get yourself into that. Just having a slipper, and a person would wear a slipper, this is sufficient. So the first thing that is forbidden is al-makhit for men. The second one is, we'll count 10 inshallah ta'ala briefly. Covering the head of the man. Covering the head with a head cover. But having an umbrella or being in a car and things like this, of course, this is okay, there's no harm. And this is clearly stated, even if someone dies in Hajj or in state of al-ihram, the Prophet ﷺ, when a Sahabi died during Hajj, he commanded the people for his kafan not to cover his head, because he yub'ath yawm al-qiyamati mulabbiyan. He will be resurrected in the day of judgment making talbiyah. So he is to be buried as if he is in the state of al-ihram without covering his head. So the second thing is not to cover the head. Number 3 is covering the face of the woman with a niqab or the burqa. And again, we talked about that. So this is number 3. Number 4 is, I want to make them with the orders that I have here, is to use any tib or itr or any good smell or perfume, whether it's oil or other than oil, anything that makes, that people put on their body to smell good. This is not permissible. This is prohibited in the state of al-ihram. And it's very obvious when it comes to the tib. It's from the sunnah, from the recommended acts before you make ihram, is that you put perfume on. So you put deodorant, you put perfume on, but on the parts of the body that the ihram is not going to be on it. So the head, the face, the hands, but not on the clothing of al-ihram itself. So that's why the clothing of al-ihram is not to be, with bukhur or scent to be exposed to it or to put perfume on it. This is not permissible. But on the body, before you put your ihram on, it's from the sunnah to have, good smell on. But then once a person in the state of al-ihram, this is not permissible till the umrah is finished or till the ihram is finished. Sometimes there's details. Can you wash your mouth with toothpaste? The answer is, as the ulama, they say yes, because this is not it's not a perfume. You're not doing that to smell good in front of people. This is, cleaning your mouth. If you want to use the suwak, mashallah, that's the sunnah. Can you use soap with a nice smell? It's better to avoid it. But does it break the ihram? Some says yes, because it has a good smell and the smell stays with you. So it's better to avoid it. And others, they said you don't use the soap so that you smell good in front of people. It's just a way to wash your hands. But again, it's better to be away from the differences of opinions, to stay away from these types of soap. So this is a tib. Number 4, a tib or perfume and the like of this. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, وَلَا ثَوْبًا مَسَّهُ الزعفران. Do not wear clothing that has been touched with الزعفران al-waras, something that smells good. Number 5, to remove the hair from the body. It's prohibited to cut one's hair, to shave one's hair. Of course, shaving the beard is haram in Hajj and before Hajj and after Hajj. Cutting the nails. So all of that is recommended before you make Hajj. When a person takes a shower, he cuts his nails, shave the pubic hair and underarm hair and things like this. But once a person in the state of al-ihram, it's not permissible to take any hair intentionally. Anything, take this as a rule. If something happens by mistake or forgetfulness, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, رُفِعَ عَنْ أُمَّتِي الْخَطَأُ وَالنِّسْيَانِ. My ummah is not going to be responsible for the mistakes or forgetfulness. Sometimes a person is like this with his beard and he's thinking, so he does this and then he finds a hair or two in his hand. It does not require a kafar. As the ulama, they say, Wallahu so removing any hair, this is not permissible, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَحْلِقُوا رُؤُوسَكُمْ حَتَّى يَبْلُغَ الْهَدْيُ مَحِلَّهُ. And if someone has a condition, as it happened to some of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they had the lice. So the Prophet ﷺ told them to shave, but then they would do the kafar. So when these mahdurat, when these things, the prohibited actions, if a person has an excuse, a valid excuse, they can do these things and no sins on them, but they have to do the expiation. But if someone doesn't have an excuse and he does these prohibited actions, then this is sinful. And he still have to do the expiation, right? So removing the hair, and this is for both men and women. Again, the only differences between men and women is the niqab and the gloves versus the entire body for the men. Number 6, which I mentioned it with removing the hair, but to be more specific, cutting the nails. This is also something that is consensus among the ulama that this is not permissible unless a person has an excuse. You have a nail that is, hurting you. All of a sudden, maybe you hit something and the nail kind of needs to be removed. Remove it, and there's no harm in that case, inshallah ta'ala. And to be safe, do the expiation, as we'll talk about the expiations, inshallah ta'ala. Number 7, which is maybe not practical nowadays, is to kill an animal to eat, right? So a sight. And that has details to it. When people would travel long distance and they see a deer passing by, they want to eat. And this was a huge fitna, a trial for them. Because once you're in the state of al-ihram, you cannot hunt any animal. You cannot even point to someone that is not in ihram. When they go for the trips of Hajj in the past, not all of them are in the state of al-ihram. People are just there to serve, for example. So they themselves, they can go hunt for them. They can go get animals for them. But if you're walking and you see a deer, hey, there's one over there, it's not permissible for a person in state of ihram, whether to do it himself or whether to guide or to aid someone. But if someone else is not in the state of al-ihram, and they do that and they bring the food, then they can eat. So this is, and there's a special expiation for a side which is mentioned in the Quran. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even tested the believers when they were with the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, when they were going in ihram, the animals were very close to them. And this was a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the Sahaba. Even the ayah says, تَنَالُهَ أَيْدِيكُمْ, that if someone extend his hand, he will catch the animal. Usually the animals, they run, right? And they scared of human beings. But they were coming closer to them while they're in state of al-ihram with the Prophet ﷺ. If someone would catch it, they will get the animal. And it shows the strength of their iman. Hungry, traveling. And as some of the ulama nowadays, they say, you see how the many tests we have very close to us. So we have to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at all times. So this is with regards to as-sayd. This is number 7. And number 8 is to have the contract of marriage while in the state of al-ihram, or even intend to marriage with al-khitbah, is when you ask for marriage from someone or you make a marriage contract. All of that is forbidden in the state of al-ihram, when the person is in the state of al-ihram. So people are traveling, a mother, for example, would try to have her son engaged to someone. This is all not permissible whatsoever, of course, in the state of al-ihram. Number 9, the relations that would be between the husband and the wife, and anything that leads to it, touching and so on. So all of that is forbidden while the person in the state of al-ihram, and there are major consequences as a result of that. It can break the entire Hajj of a person, with some details, inshallah ta'ala, we can talk about it. And this is clearly stated in the ayah, al-hajju ashhurun ma'lumat, faman farada fihinna al-hajj, fala rafatha wala fusuqa wala jidala fil hajj. No rafath. Rafath is the relations between a husband and wife. So this is with regards to the jima' and the details of that. Number 10, it's still from the mahdurat, even though there's no expiation to it, but reviling one another, arguing, fighting, whatever, all these types of things, because it's clearly stated in the Quran, فَلَا رَفَثَ وَلَا فُسُوقَ وَلَا جِدَالَ فِي الْحَجِّ. And subhanallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's word's perfect, of course, and you would find all kinds of reasons in Hajj to argue. And that's why it's mentioned specifically, وَلَا جِدَالَ فِي الْحَجِّ. Do not argue in Hajj, because so many people in one place and everyone has their own opinion, and things are not going according to what they desire, and logistics and things of that nature. So people start to argue while they are in state of al-ihram, which is something that is forbidden, as stated specifically in the Quran. So these are 10 points that are the prohibitions during ihram. Is it clear? So again, can we count them quickly? So men wearing makhit, covering the head, covering the face of the woman and the gloves, having perfume on. Number 5, removing the hair from the body. Number 6, cutting the nails. Number 7, the hunt or the game animals. Number 8, marriage, contract, and engagements. Number 9, the al-jima' or the relations between husband and wife, and anything that is prerequisite to this or comes before it. And number 10, reviling or arguing, and so on. But if someone does any of these mahdurat, as we said, if a person does it forgetfully, except the relations, would be dealt later, inshallah. But if someone, does not observe any of these prohibitions, or they do it, then there is a kafara, and the kafara is not an order, but is a choice. Either to feed 6 poor people from the poor people of Mecca, so it has to be in Mecca. And there, practically, you would find booths where you can give that and they can purchase food and give it to the poor, or you can buy 6 meals and you can give it to the poor there. Or nisf sa' grains that are equal to 1.5 kilogram of any grains that you can give it to the poor. So whether it's meal to be fixed or grains to be given. Or that a person fasts 3 days. Fasting 3 days. Whether it's there or afterwards, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be right in Hajj. And the third one is dam to sacrifice. That's the most expensive. But this is in that specific, in the issue of mahdurat al-ihram. If someone does something that is forbidden for a person in a state of al-ihram. As they say, the fidya here على التخيير. That means you have a choice. Because there's other things where you have to do one thing. If not, if you're not able to, then you go to the next one, which is when a person doesn't do a wajib, for example, an obligation in Hajj. But mahduratul ihram, the things that are forbidden in the state of al-ihram, this is how to expiate for the sin if a person does any of these prohibitions. So then that leads us to the type of Hajj. The type of Hajj. And we'll just say them briefly, but most of the people, they do one, which is actually everybody's recommended to do that one part. But when a person is coming to al-miqat, either a person can make the intentions for Hajj alone, and that's called Hajj ifrad or mufrid, to be mufrid, like one, making Hajj only, coming for Hajj and leaving, and that's it. Or to have the intention of making Hajj qiran, which is qiran, that means when you put two things together. Hajj qiran, that means you're making Hajj and Umrah together in one nusuk, in one ihram, without breaking the ihram. And that means a person would say labbaik Allahumma Hajj wa Umrah, both Hajj wa Umrah. And the actions of Hajj and Umrah will be together and will be with one ihram only. And the third one, Hajj al-Tamattu. Al-Tamattu, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says it in the Quran, فَمَن تَمَتَّعَ بِالْعُمْرَةِ الْحَجِّ. Whoever makes Umrah and then Hajj. So Tamattu is that a person coming at the months of Hajj. The months of Hajj are Shawwal, which is right after Ramadan, Dhul Qa'dah, and Dhul Hijjah. So if a person comes to Mecca in Shawwal, or now in Dhul Qa'dah, or in Dhul Hijjah, to make Hajj Tamattu, that means to come to make Umrah. So to say Labbaik Allahumma Umrah. A person doesn't have to say Labbaik Allahumma Umrah to Hajj, like some people, they say no, just Umrah. So they make Umrah, and they've done with the Umrah, and they wear the normal clothing, everything is normal, back to their normal life. And then on the 8th of the Hijjah, from Mecca, they're staying in Mecca. In Mecca, they, from their hotel, from their place, they would make the ihram for Hajj. So they start again, they take a shower, clean themselves, and so on, and they put the clothing of ihram. And from Mecca, they don't have to go outside even of Mecca. They would say, Labbaik Allahumma Hajj. The 8th of the Hijjah. They do that in the 8th of the Hijjah, and then they go to Mina. Right? So this is Hajj Tamattu. A person has a choice to do any of the three, yes. Which is the best? You would find even debates, even among the ulama. The Prophet ﷺ, what he did is Hajj Qiran. Why? Because he had his hadi, he had his sacrifice with him, traveling with him from Al-Madinah. And that's why whoever comes with his sacrifice, traveling with him, then the best nusuk for him is Qiran. Because that's what the Prophet ﷺ did. But no one takes that in the airplane or anything like that. So in that case, what's the best type of nusuk without going into the details is a tamattu. Is a tamattu, and some had said even it's an obligation, but the correct opinion that it's the most recommended one. That is to go make Umrah and relieve yourself from al-ihram, and then on the 8th you make the ihram for Hajj. The masail of Hajj are so many, and the ease of the rules of the Sharia, mashallah, is perfect. So sometimes people, they reach Makkah late. And they, for example, and this has happened to the Sahaba radiallahu anhu, or women, they get their menses. So these are situations that can come. I would mention just an example to show that a woman comes with the intention of making Hajj Tamattu, right? So she comes by the miqat and she says what? Labbaik Allahumma Umrah. She's only making Umrah, correct? And right after that, before she reached Mecca, she got her monthly cycle, which is Salah is forbidden, Tawaf is forbidden. Everything else for the Hajj is permissible, except for the women when she has her cycle, except the Tawaf, and that's the only one. Of course, Salah, she doesn't have to make up the Salah, but you cannot make Hajj without Tawaf. Tawaf of Al-Hajj as a pillar of Al-Hajj. But for Umrah, also she cannot fulfill the Umrah unless she makes the Tawaf of Al-Umrah. So she has to wait till she's done with the 7 days or the 6 days or whatever, and then she will be still in the state of al-ihram. This is in other days of Hajj. If she does go in Ramadan or something like this, and she got her monthly cycle, she has to wait in the state of al-ihram till she's done, and then she makes the actions of Umrah. But here in Hajj, if she comes and she made Hajj Tamattu, and she said labbaik Allahumma Umrah, and after that she got the monthly cycle, and there's only 2 days left for the 8th of the Hijjah, for example. So she won't be able to make Umrah and then take the ihram off and then make another ihram for Hajj. So in that case, and that happened at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, then in that case she changes the intention from tamattu to Hajj Qiran. So she's in state of ihram and she made tamattu, she made niyyah of Umrah only. But then she got her cycle. Then her intention will be that she would make the Hajj a part of her ihram. So that means she stay in the ihram, does not make tawaf, and in the 8th of the Hijjah she goes to Mina, and then after that, with the rituals of Hajj, and then she makes one tawaf for the Hajj, and that means she made Hajj and Umrah together with one ihram. But this is again something that we can talk about some of these exceptions. But it shows the 3 types of Hajj. So if you ask which one should I choose for myself, tamattu, for sure, inshallah ta'ala. Right? If you have, the Hajj al-Mufrid, al-Ifrad, there's no sacrifice upon that person making Hajj Ifrad. It's valid if a person wants to do that, that's fine. And there's no Hajj for that person. Qiran and Tamattu, they both have to make Hajj. They have to do the sacrifice. And the difference in actions, what is extra? The Tamattu will have one extra tawaf and one extra sa'i. So because you make tawaf and sa'i for Umrah and you're done. And then for Hajj you have tawaf and sa'i, right? Separate. If you make in Hajj Qiran, you will make, if you come early, you will still make tawaf al-Qudum, and then you have to make the tawaf of al-Hajj. But you can make your sa'i in the beginning between Safa and Marwa. You don't have to do it again. So you would find the difference in physical actions, maybe one sa'i. Or if a person comes late, he goes straight, so it's one tawaf and one sa'i. And the mufrid the same way. So it's not much of a more actions. It's just the sacrifice that has to be done. And that's also something to be discovered. So it's Hajj al-Tamattu' is that you go with Umrah and you finish the Umrah completely. And then you are not in state of al-Ihram. And then on the 8th of the Hijjah, you make the state of al-Ihram. So these are the types of nusuk. Why the ulama, they say Tamattu' is the best? Because the Prophet ﷺ, he said, even though he was doing Hajj Qiran, and he took his animal with him, he says, if I didn't suktul haddi, if I did not take the haddi with me, I would have made it Umrah. And he would say to the companions, those who did not have the haddi, to make it Umrah. They even went with Hajj only. They changed their intention to make it Umrah. And after that, they finished with the Umrah and they make Hajj. So this is what the Prophet ﷺ would tell them to do. But again, the matter is easy. And the person, as far as the validity is concerned, all of them are okay. So this is with regards to the 3 types of Al-Hajj. The next point, now we talk about the pillars and the conditions or the obligations of Hajj. Briefly, inshallah ta'ala, plus we have to talk about some of these actions afterwards. When we say pillars of Hajj, there are 4 pillars of Hajj. And the meaning of a pillar is rukn. That means no way a person, his Hajj will be valid unless he has to do these pillars. There's no way out, basically. No expiations, no kafara, nothing. You have to make these 4 pillars of Hajj. The first one is, and this is where we need to be really focused on what each one is versus the obligations. The first one is al-ihram. A person has to be in the state of al-ihram. But what is meant by the ihram as a pillar? Right? We're talking very specific fiqh matter here. As a pillar is the niyyah. We're not talking about clothing and things like this. Ihram meaning that you say labbaik Allahumma hajjah. Or labbaik Allahumma umrah as a pillar of umrah. If a person doesn't say that, he's not in state of ihram. So there's no way a person can make hajj without ihram. Right? You have to be in state of ihram. If someone, again, he woke up and find himself in Mecca. He did not make ihram by the miqat. Then, if he's not able to go out, what does he do? He says, labbaik Allahumma. For the umrah, he can go to outside of Mecca. But this case, he came from outside, or hajj. He say, labbaik Allahumma, umrah, from whatever he is in, and he expiate with the fasting 3 days and so on. But he has to say لبيك اللهم عمرة. This is what al-ihram is to say لبيك اللهم عمرة or لبيك اللهم حج. Recently someone asked, and this is a repeated matter, especially with people forgetting to make the ihram, or they forgot to take their clothing of ihram. I've seen that more than one time. A person in the plane and he lost his ihram. That means he's going to cross the miqat without putting the ihram clothing on. So what that person should do, some people, they would just, well, there's nothing for him to do, so they don't say labbaik Allahumma umrah, which is wrong, of course, right? If that happens, that person, when he passes by the miqat and he's wearing clothing, he doesn't have clothing of al-ihram, say labbaik Allahumma umrah, you're doing that pillar. You're not missing the pillar. You are now in state of al-ihram. So everything that is forbidden for you, you forbid it. The only thing is that the clothing, you're not able to do it. So once you're able to do it, you do it, and then you do the expiation. But if he doesn't say labbaik Allahumma umrah, then he goes to the other expiation, which is dam, and has to be dam. If he finds himself going to Mecca and there's no way for him to go out to the miqat, it's not about the prohibitions of ihram anymore. Why? Because he did not say labbaik Allahumma umrah or labbaik Allahumma hajj. He has to do them. He has to sacrifice. So then when we say the pillar of hajj is al-ihram, is the niyyah. Is the niyyah that he is getting himself into the nusuk, into the ritual of hajj or umrah. The second pillar is al-wuquf bi-Arafah. To be in Arafah as a pillar of hajj. And this is where it gets sometimes confusing, remember last year, but it's easy to understand, inshallah. From the perspective of a pillar, what is meant by al-wuquf bi-Arafah, you know that Arafah is in what day? The 9th of the Hajj. We'll talk about that separately, inshallah. To be in Arafah on the 9th of the Hajj, the Arafah time starts from after Zawal, after Dhuhr, all the way to Maghrib. And then once the sun sets, people leave Arafah and they go to Muzdalif. And this is what normally everybody does. But al-wuquf bi-Arafah as a pillar is from the time of Zawal on the 9th of the Hijjah, which is the time of Dhuhr. It goes all the way to the Fajr of the 10th. What does that mean? It means if someone was late and missed Arafah, for whatever reason there is, and Maghrib time came on the 9th of the Hijjah, did he miss his Hajj? Not yet. He still can go to Arafah during the night and stay there for 5 minutes, 1 minute, whatever there is, and he goes to Muzdalifah, he made it for Hajj. As long as he goes to Arafah before Fajr of the 10th. Nobody optionally would do this, right? Everybody will go to Arafah at Dhuhr time. But this is what we say, but as a pillar. We have to be precise with the words pillar. Because pillar meaning that you missed Hajj, you cannot make it up. If the Fajr of the 10th of the Hijjah comes and someone did not come to Arafah whatsoever, his Hajj is over. He cannot make it up. There's no way to even no expiations, nothing works because he missed Arafah. This is if the Fajr of the 10th comes. And we'll talk about the wajib when it comes to Arafah, which is different than the pillar. So as a pillar of Hajj, al-wuquf bi-Arafah, and that starts from the Dhuhr time. In the 9th of the Hijjah, it goes all the way to the Fajr of the 10th of the Hijjah, even for 1 minute. Number 3 is Tawaf al-Ifadah. The Tawaf of al-Hajj, or they call it Tawaf al-Ziyarah. This is a pillar of al-Hajj. And there's a specific time that, you cannot do it before that specific time. Tawaf of al-Hajj as a pillar. You cannot make Hajj unless you make that Tawaf. When does it start? It starts from the middle of the night of the 10th of the Hijjah. So, which is after Arafah. Arafat is the 9th. And then the night comes, which is the night of the day after. So it can a person do the Tawaf of Al-Hajj on the 9th of the Hijjah? No. It does not count. Does he do it after Maghrib? It does not count. It counts from in the middle of the night. If he does it after the middle of the night, then it counts. It's not the most perfect time, but this is for women. For those who are weak, they can do it from then. And it's perfectly to be done on the 10th. Is there an end limit to it? No. As long as it's done. And the person will continue to be in the state of al-ihram till they do the tawaf of al-hajj or tawaf al-ifad. So if they didn't do it on the 10th, they can do it on the 11th, the 12th, the 13th, but they are still in state of ihram till they make the tawaf of al-Hajj. This is as a pillar. And number 4 is the sa'i, or the between al-Safa wal Marwa, to make it as a separate pillar, to make sa'i between al-Safa wal Marwa, and the sa'i is always after tawaf. You cannot make sa'i before the tawaf. Tawaf around the Kaaba and then the sa'i between the Safa and the Marwa. So these are the 4 pillars of Hajj. As far as the pillar is concerned, we're not talking yet about what to do, what and next and things like this. So these are the 4 pillars of Hajj. It's important to write them down, to remember them as pillars. Al-Ihram, which is the niyyah, and the wuquf bi-Arafah, and you make sure that it's, when it's mentioned as a pillar, from the dhuhr of the day of Arafah till the fajr of the 10th of the Hijjah, which is the Eid day. And number 3 is the tawaf, which starts from the middle of the night after the 9th of the Hijjah, and you have the sa'i between the Safa and the Marwa. If we can get to the obligations before Maghrib, I'm not sure if we can do it, but it's 7 obligations. And obligations mean wajibat. And wajib is different than the pillar, different in the way that we deal with it if a person misses it. And that's why they put it under the meaning of wajibat. Wajibat means if a person misses it intentionally, that's haram. Forgetfully, there's a reason, excuse, whatever, then the Hajj is not over. Different than the pillar. That means there's ways or expiations or to make it up. But still the Hajj would count. But never to be missed, of course. And these are 7 obligations, 7 wajibat of al-Hajj. If we count them one after the other, inshallah ta'ala, and then we'll get to understand them when we go through one step after the other. If someone misses any of these wajibat, then upon him is dam. They have to do a sacrifice to be done in Mecca for the poor people of Mecca. Even if a person remembered 10 years after Hajj that he missed a wajib, then he need to have someone to slaughter an animal for him in Mecca and to be given to the poor. So the first of the 7 is al-ihram from the miqat. See the difference now? To make ihram from the miqat is wajib. We said as a pillar, al-ihram what? Al-ihram is a pillar. But as a wajib, as an obligation, is to make it from the miqat. So if someone doesn't make the ihram from the miqat, he made it when he was in Jeddah, that means he passed the miqat. He did not do a wajib. But if he says it in Jeddah, labbaik Allahumma umrah, his umrah is valid. Labbaik Allahumma hajjah, his hajj is valid. But he has to expiate for the fact that he didn't make the ihram from the miqat. Did not make ihram, did not say labbaik Allahumma. Not that he broke some of the ihram rulings. You understand the difference? So as a wajib, to make the ihram from the miqat. If he goes back to the miqat, mashallah, there's no harm on him. So al-ihram from the miqat, from the mawaqit that the Prophet ﷺ specifically mentioned. The second one, again, this is also might be confusing to some when it comes to Arafah. As a wajib of Arafah is to stay in Arafah till Maghrib if you entered Arafah any time before that. So if you entered Arafah, Arafah is a valley. If you entered Arafah after Dhuhr, which is what the Arafah time starts, it is not permissible for you to leave Arafah till sunsets. If a person leaves intentionally, then this is sinful and he has to expiate. And if he forgetfully or whatever, that means there's no sins, but he has to expiate. But then we said as a pillar, if you go at night, that's if you missed being in Arafah. You understand? But if you entered Arafah, you cannot leave. And you should not choose not to enter Arafah because you have to enter Arafah. This is the first one in the pillar if a person has an excuse. But if a person entered Arafah from after Dhuhr, then it is not permissible to leave till sun sets. Sun has to set completely before a person can leave the boundaries of Arafah. And you stay away from anyone that would tell you otherwise. This is a wajib of Hajj. So let's go, things like this. People can sit in the buses, no problem. They can wait, yes, but they cannot leave the boundaries of Arafah till sunset as a wajib of Arafah. And we're not talking about the rewards of Arafah and things. This is something else. This is as the wajibat. Number 3 to spend the night after Arafah in Muzdalifah, at least till the middle of the night. So this is number 3. After people left from Arafah, they go to Muzdalifah. So Muzdalifah, and every time I wanted to get a map, but I forget, but alhamdulillah. So if you look at me, inshallah, you have Makkah is here, right? If you can imagine, Mina is there, right? And then you have Muzdalifah attached to Mina, and Arafah is a little bit further away, right? So when people go to the 8th in Mina, and then they go to Muzdalifah, I'm sorry, they go to Arafah. So they skip Muzdalifah. They go from Mina to Arafah. We'll talk about the sequence of things. But then after they finish Arafah, they go to Muzdalifah, which is right before Mina, and to spend the night in Muzdalifah. To spend the night in Muzdalifah. So al-mabit, to spend the night in Muzdalifah, or at least half of the night in Muzdalifah, is wajib. To spend at least half of the night in Muzdalifah, this is wajib. And the Prophet ﷺ gave the rukhsah, the excuse for women and children and elder ones to leave after the middle of the night, to make it for the tawaf before the crowd comes. So if someone, women can go, those who accompany the women, old people, things like this, but as long as they stay at least to the middle of the night. So spending at least half of the night in Muzdalifah is a wajib, right? And this is the number 3. Number 4 is to stay in Mina the nights of Ayyam al-Tashriq. We didn't talk about this yet, but this is a wajib. To stay in Mina the nights of Ayyam al-Tashriq, which is, Ayyam al-Tashriq is the 11th, the 12th at least, and if a person stays to the 13th. So to spend at least more than half of the night in Mina in these days of Ayyam al-Tashriq. And this is where the Prophet ﷺ stayed. We're just listing them, and then after Maghrib we'll talk about them and how to do them. Number 5 is to make the Rami al-Jamarat, to throw the Jamarat. And the Jamarat, as we'll talk about it inshallah ta'ala, in the 10th. It starts from the middle of the night of after Arafah, which is the next day is the 10th of Dhul Hijjah. So you have only Jamrat al-Aqaba on the 10th. There are 3 Jamarat. When you're coming from Muzdalifah or from Arafah to Mina, so the first one, Jamra that you would face is, they call it a Jamra Sughra, the small one. Then the middle one, then Jamratul Aqaba, or the Kubra, which is closer to Mecca. So in the 10th of Dhul Hijjah, you only throw the last one, the closest to Mecca, and we'll talk about that and how to be done. Then the 11th and the 12th, at least, of Dhul Hijjah, you have to do the 3 of them, 7, 7, 7. Every day, 7, 7, 7, and then the 12th, the same thing. And if people leave, make ta'ajjul, that's fine. If they stay to the 13th, they make the 3 Jamarat. And this is wajib. If a person misses it, he has the dam upon the person to do. So this is the Jamarat. We'll talk about the details of that inshallah. Number 6 as a wajib is al-halq or taqsir, to shave the head or to shorten the head. This is as a wajib of Hajj. After finishing the Hajj, or on the 10th, there are actions to be done. We'll talk about them inshallah. Every day there are things to be observed. So shaving the head or shortening the head, and shaving is more recommended of course, this is a wajib. So that means if someone forgot or he could not or whatever, then there's them that he has to observe. Number 7 for Hajj, Tawaf al-Wada'. The farewell Tawaf is wajib. And that's the last thing that a person would do in Mecca before he leaves. So if he stays for a few weeks, and then before he leaves, he still has that as an obligation. It's recommended in Umrah, but it's wajib in Hajj. And if a person doesn't do it, then he has to give them. And there's always the common question is, if a person leaving right after Hajj, and they didn't make the Tawaf of al-Hajj, they can combine them together with one Tawaf, yes. But as long as the last thing before a person leaves Mecca, it has to be the Tawaf. And to one's best ability, of course. So they say if you need to be ready 8 hours before we tell you, then you be before then, 5 hours before that you make your Tawaf, that's fine. So this is Tawaf al-Wada'. So these are 7 obligations of Hajj that we need to make, like a checklist. You have to make these things, and then we'll talk about how these things are done. So again, the 7 obligations are to make ihram from the miqat, to stand in Arafah till Maghrib if a person enters Arafah during the day, to spend the night of the Laylatul Nahr in Muzdalifah, at least half of the night. And number 4, to spend the night in Mina in the days of At-Tashriq, or most of the night. Number 5 is the Jamarat. The 10th one, Jamra only, Jamrat al-Aqaba, and the rest of the days, the 3 Jamarat. Number 6, shaving or shortening the hair. Number 7 is the farewell Tawaf, Tawaf al-Wada'. Then after that, inshallah ta'ala, after Maghrib, the way we'll do it, inshallah ta'ala, we'll talk about the Tawaf, and we'll talk about the Sa'i, and we'll talk about the Jamarat as separate actions. Now you're in Tawaf. How do you make Tawaf briefly? You're in Sa'i. How to make Sa'i? How to make the Jamarat? And then after that, we'll talk briefly of the, what do you call it? The time, when you do, every day, what do you do? Exactly with what things to be done from the very beginning to the end. And that would be, inshallah ta'ala, after Maghrib, inshallah. What is it? The slaughter for the, yes, it's not from the wajibat of al-Hajj, but this is from when it comes to for those who are making tamattu and those who are making qiran, yes. And if they don't have the means to make slaughtering, it's not the expiation for them is dam. In that case, they have to fast 10 days, 3 in Mecca and 7 when they go back, if they don't have the means financially. Yes, it has to be done in Mecca. All the sacrifices done in Hajj and Umrah, it has to be in Mecca. Whether it's the Hajj for the Tamattu or Qiran, or Jubran for the dam as a result of expiation, all of that has to be in Mecca. And feeding the poor has to be all in Mecca. Is that then? Is it time or not? Well, inshallah, we'll continue after Salah Ta'ala for questions. Inshallah Ta'ala. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam.